Hello there, and welcome to episode 16 of the Or So She Says podcast. I don't actually know what to do for episode 17 because 17 is like my favorite number. So I'm like, shit, I need to do something really cool for episode 17. Although this episode is actually very, very cool. If this is your first time here, hello and welcome. My name is Narissa Shea, and I am a personal trainer, nutritionist, sport and exercise psychology consultant, yoga instructor, Reiki practitioner, and a professional Irish dancer. So today's episode is going to be a little bit more woo-woo than my usual episodes, okay? And it's probably going to be one of the more off the cuff, unstructured episodes, because in order for me to actually honor the name of this podcast episode, it makes sense to kind of just go with the flow a little bit more. But before I start and jump straight into things, please make sure if you like the podcast to follow the show, give the show a rating, or if you're on Apple Podcasts, I think you can leave a little review. And if you do really like the episodes or any of the episodes, please feel free to share them with your friends, share them with your family, or share them on social media and tag me at Narissa_Shea Fitness. So, the topic I want to discuss today is how I ultimately use soul, or you can insert whatever word you want here, okay? Higher power, intuition, God, whatever floats your boat, okay? And how I actually use this to guide my work as a coach, as a yoga instructor, and as a healer. Now, I think it's kind of self explanatory of how you kind of use this as a healer, but how do you use it as a coach? That's the interesting one. So I'm going to start off today with my own journey into tapping into that inner wisdom. I'm going to talk about the milestones over the years, the trials, the tribulations, and where I'm kind of at today with it all. I'm also going to offer you some practical tips on where you could possibly start on your own journey. If any of these things that I'm going to list resonate a little bit with you, okay? Firstly, maybe you're someone who feels completely disconnected from their own body, okay? You feel like you're living in your mind, but you're not in your body at all. Maybe you're someone who feels like your thoughts completely run the show and that you're kind of treading through some really murky water at the minute and not really having any direction or not really knowing how to kind of grab a hold of things, for want of a better word. You just feel like your mind is just having these constant loops and you don't even know where to start with to unpack it all, basically. And a lot of the time, then we're hoping for that next doctor visit, the next coach we sign up to, or the next diet and exercise plan. We're kind of hoping that this next thing that we sign up to is going to fix us, okay? And the plot twist here is no matter how hard things are at the moment, I promise you there is nothing to fix. Maybe we just need to reconnect our mind, our body, and our soul. And then you will realize there is actually nothing to fix. You're absolutely perfect just the way you are, which I know can sound like a bit of toxic positivity if you're in a really dark place at the moment. But bear with me. As someone who has been through it over the years, I promise you there's method in my madness as to why I'm suggesting this, okay? So where do I start? I suppose we're going to start with yoga, because if you've listened to any of my other podcasts, you'll know the story of how I really got into yoga and why it was kind of important, because this was probably my first step to reconnect into my body, reconnect into my soul, because they're all linked. And I'm going to talk about this at the end. We all think they're not linked. And in my method that I've devised recently, I explain this in full detail on a private podcast that I'm going to link below, and how I kind of approach things where we're looking at the mind, we're looking at the body, we're looking at the soul, but we're also looking at it as a unit and we're not always treating it separately because they are all interlinked, okay? But I suppose it's important to start with yoga because I was someone who was so living in my head for so many years, and I was working as a dancer for so many years. I actually just was never listening to my body though. My body was trying to tell me so many things. Like I was starting to get anxiety. I was starting to get panic attacks. I was getting injured all the time. I was getting sick all the time. I was constantly ending up with sore throats and fevers and everything. And usually our body is our last port of call. So usually things will start with a thought, and that thought then manifests into more of a thought pattern, which can lead to trapped emotions. It can lead to trauma. It can lead to all these things, which are then stored in the body, which then come out in the body as illnesses, ailments, all these different things. And usually our last port of call is the body is like, okay, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm going to scream at you. And I'm like, whoa, okay. And there's a lot of inner wisdom in your body that has just been passed down through generations and generations that I think would be awesome to kind of just everyone to tap into a little bit more. But anyway, my story with yoga was actually really funny because when I started practicing yoga in college, I had absolutely no interest in it. I was in full on party mode, dancer mode. I'm your typical type A. I just wanted to be on the go all the time. I was killing myself, swimming, doing all the cardio. I was dancing, I was competing, I was doing gigs, I was doing everything. I never slowed down. I never listened to my body. So I had absolutely no interest in yoga in college. And I used to just go and I'd probably be hungover and I'd just fall asleep at the end and I'd be snoring away. And I remember my friends would be like, oh, she's asleep again. I can hear her snoring again. And I was like, that was a great nap. But then when I got a little bit older and I was on tour and I got injured, this is around the time COVID hit as well. So we all ended up having to come home. No one really had anything to do. All our work was cancelled. So I couldn't really do anything. And I decided this is probably a good time to get into yoga because I don't really have anything else on. I can't dance. I can't do anything. So maybe approaching yoga with a fresh mindset to give it a go is the best thing to do. Now, bearing in mind when I started, I was doing it very much for the physical, which is why most people start doing yoga. They are like, oh, I want to get a bit more flexible and I want to get a little bit stronger, or they do it because they can see kind of a physical benefit to doing it. But you practice yoga enough and something clicks with you and you realize it's so much more than that. So I was doing Adrian Dunn's 30-day challenge, which I think everyone did during COVID. It was so funny. I think everyone was flat out doing it. But I actually stuck to it and I did do it every day. I think I missed like one day, but I caught up on it the day after, like because I was so adamant I was going to do these 30 days and just see what the fuss is about, why everyone was going on and on and on about how amazing yoga is. And I actually get it. I think it was around day 20 or something. Something clicked with me because she takes her practice nice and slow. And it's very much about like the body and the breath. And she'd have you in Shavasana and you actually have to stay in it. And she did all the things that you really should do in order to kind of connect better with yoga, not just go to a class in a gym where they're trying to kill you with all these poses and they skip Shavasana or they're talking all through it. Like that's not yoga, in my opinion. That's an exercise class. But she really got you to slow down, which is really hard at the start when you're someone who has a really racing mind. And I had a conversation with someone the other day, one of my clients, and I was up and down on the call because I was jumping on the floor and then I was back in the chair. And she was like, Narissa, I swear to God, do you have ADD? And I was like, I probably could have. Like, I don't know, never got diagnosed. But I was like, I've always been someone like who's very like, jump to this, jump to this, jump to this. Now, I'm very good at making myself concentrate when I need to concentrate. And I have a lot of tools in the toolbox to slow my mind down. But there's a lot of things that when I think back of when I was younger, if I went to the doctor, they probably would have diagnosed me with a million things under the sun. OCD definitely being one of them. I was really, really bad when I was younger with that need to control things. And when there was things that weren't in my control, I was very much the person who was flicking the light switches and everything. I talk about this a lot in the mental health podcast. I'm not going to go too far into this, but something did click with me anyway when I was about 20 days in, and it forced me to just slow down. And I was like, whoa. And I just listened to my body and I just started crying. And I was like, whoa. There was just this like real love and connection that I had with my body for the first time in my whole life. And I'd never felt that before. I'd never felt this love for my body because I've always just battered the shit out of it and expected it to just perform to the best of its abilities and get angry with it when it got sick or when it got injured. For once, I was in my body and I was not in my head. And a lot of other kind of powerful things happened when I kept practicing yoga. Like I was doing yoga classes online, and one of the classes was a very powerful hip opening sequence. And by the end of it, we were in pigeon, which is quite a deep hip opening stretch for people who don't do yoga. I just started bawling, crying again. And I was like, what the hell was that? And then at the end of the class, the teacher was just like, yeah, that was probably a very emotional class for people because people will argue that, oh, stop saying to your students that emotions are trapped in the hips and blah, 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 blah. And there's a lot of It's funny, like you think the spiritual world and the yoga world and all that, that everyone is friends and everyone. I was like, there's just the same kind of animosity that goes on there. One person will say one thing, the other person will say the other. So people be like, no, emotions aren't trapped in the hips. And I'm like, well, if you believe in the energy centers of the body and how the chakras are related to different parts of the body, it makes sense that when you do a big muscle fascia release in different places, you're releasing a lot of stored trauma in there. Okay. And it just needs to, which is why, if you're interested in any of this, somatic therapy is my new thing that I just want to jump right into, because I want to start using it in my yoga classes. And it's very much about learning different exercises to release trauma or blocked emotions and stuff in the body. I'll talk a little bit more about that though when I talk about energy bodies later. But yeah, when I started seeing how powerful this practice was, it kind of really got me into thinking, oh, I actually would love to study this. And, not even teach yoga. I wasn't sure if I wanted to teach yoga, but I definitely wanted to understand more about it. I started getting a lot more into like the philosophy and stuff, and I found it really, really interesting. So I decided to go and do my 200-hour teacher training. And originally, actually, I wanted to go to India, but it was in the height of COVID, so you couldn't go to India. So I ended up going to Bali. And everything is for a reason. I met some of my best friends over there. One of the girls, like literally, she ended up like she's actually living down the road from me, and we get to do so many events and stuff together now, which is so cool. So it was divine timing. But for people that would be a little bit on the fence and they just think of yoga as this painful thing that their friend has tried to drag them to before, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what it is. So when a lot of people think of yoga, they think of like Instagram influencers showing off these inversions like headstands, handstands, arm balances. And look, I was one of these people. But this is a very westernized perception of yoga, which is sometimes closer to mindful stretching. Yoga is actually an ancient discipline that has been practiced for more than 5,000 years and one of the 6 ancient philosophies that originated in India. So this is really cool, okay? Because if you think of that mind, body, soul element that I'm talking about the whole time, the word yoga itself is derived from the Sanskrit word yuj, which actually means to join or to unite. And it touches on yoga's emphasis of the union between individual consciousness and universal consciousness. Or you can put this another way and say the ego, the soul, or the mind and the body. Like we have all these different names and these different labels for them, and everyone will argue about different things, but ultimately we're all talking about the same thing, which is actually hilarious because everything is connected. So in the writings of this man called Patanjali, okay, who is thought to have lived more than 2,000 years ago, he is often actually referred to as the father of yoga. So yoga is actually described as the process of controlling the modifications of the mind. Unsurprisingly, this ancient way of thinking bears little resemblance to what we actually see on social media today. So, one of the most common forms of yoga that we see practiced in the Western world today is actually based on Hatha yoga, which places great emphasis on postures and breathing techniques. Okay. But just before I get into this, I want to point out originally yoga was sitting down meditation. That is literally what it was. I found this so interesting. I was like, what? They were like, that is originally what yoga was. It was literally sitting down and meditating. Okay. Now, think of the Buddha under the tree. We're talking that kind of vibe, okay? But what they found was when they started teaching yoga to younger boys, the boys were obviously what I would compare it to literally all of us today. They couldn't sit down. They had too much energy. They were like, I just want to go and do this. I want to play. So getting them to just sit down and meditate was quite difficult. So that's when they actually came to the fruition that they were like, okay, we actually need to do some sort of physical movement to get the mind to calm down so they can actually sit in the meditative state at the end, which is actually the whole point of yoga. And I read a book recently and she was like, God, everyone is doing yoga wrong. Like everyone does like 55 minutes of postures and 5 minutes of meditation at the end. She was like, it should actually be probably like 25 to 30 minutes of postures and 30 minutes of meditation at the end. And I was like, whoa, because something I'm really passionate about is Shavasana at the end when you have to lie down. When teachers talk all through Shavasana, it drives me mad. And also when they skip it, or you're only there for like a minute. I'm like, I literally have done all these postures and I'm here lying down, and not just for the resting side of it, but it's the most important pose. This is where you integrate all of the stuff that you just did. So rushing the end, I always try to give my clients or my students at least 5 minutes, 5 full minutes in Shavasana at the end. And it can make people really uncomfortable because they want to move. And I'm just like, I'm going to sit with this and hold the space, because this is actually what people need. As much as I want to be like, oh, okay, we'll finish up there because I can tell people are uncomfortable. I understand that it's actually the most important pose. So when we think of yoga poses now, of what we look at today, okay, we think of asanas, which is the physical postures. But traditionally, the seated posture, and this term actually comes from the Sanskrit word seat, that's where it actually originated from. Asana was like a seated posture, a comfortable seated posture, basically, to meditate, right? But this actually now refers to any of the postures you see in yoga today. So like downward dog, warrior one, triangle pose, all of these things. Then we have Ujjayi, which is a breathing technique. And this is a technique that allows you to calm your mind by focusing on your breath. And this helps you override thoughts that could possibly distract you from your meditative state. And it also creates a sound that helps you synchronize your movements with your breath. Now, you very, very rarely see instructors telling people to do this in a yoga class today, because usually, in fairness, like us teachers, we have to teach mixed levels. If you're actually going in to teach an advanced yoga class, it's the easiest class you'll ever teach. You don't have to cue anything. You don't have to tell people what to do. You literally just talk through the sequence and it's done. So people think, oh, advanced, I'm really scared of teaching an advanced class. I'm like, no, the hardest job for a yoga teacher is teaching a mixed level class. You have people there who've never done yoga and people there who are really advanced. So you can't give the cues you'd give to advanced people, like adding extra things in, without frustrating the beginners. And then sometimes you're explaining so much to the beginners, the advanced people might think you're talking too much. So it's trying to find that in between. But Ujjayi breath is like an ocean breath. And it's actually like you constrict the mouth and breathe through the nose. So I don't know, this is going to sound really weird, but I'm going to give it a go. It's like, and it sounds like Darth Vader, right? That's actually what Ujjayi breathing is. And I remember someone saying, basically, if it sounds like Darth Vader, you're doing it right. And I was like, whoa. But even I lose that. I'll start off doing yoga with it, and then I lose it a little bit. And I'm like, oh no. The other thing you have is your drishti. And you probably will have heard teachers telling you about this, because this is focused gaze. And this is where they tell you to focus on something not moving in front of you. And the reason why they tell you to do this is in balance and postures and stuff like that. If you can focus on something not moving in front of you, it's going to help you balance. But this is actually a way of developing concentration, and it is key, as I said, for balancing poses, because when the eyes move, mind and attention follows. So this technique allows you to maintain focus. So another thing teachers might do for fun in a balancing pose is they might say, try close your eyes, and all of a sudden you're all over the place, and it's hilarious. Now, the other thing, and we don't really see this too much unless you're in like a really either advanced class or a yoga school that's very traditional and believes in using all of these, is bandhas, which are energy locks. And these actually work by synchronizing deep rhythmic breathing and movements, okay? But many of the different forms of yoga that you'll see in classes today, like gyms and stuff like that, or even in yoga schools and stuff, a lot of that would be a combination of these techniques. And you'll see classes such as power yoga, yin yoga, vinyasa yoga, ashtanga vinyasa, restorative, or even goat yoga apparently is a new thing. So it's a little bit more, as you can see, than cool handstands, okay? So I think it's really important to understand the foundations of yoga and the philosophy of yoga and stuff, because you start to see why it can be such a powerful practice, okay? Something I actually like to do in all of my yoga classes that I don't see a lot of teachers doing, but I wish they did, because I actually love it, is I will always do themes in my yoga class, no matter where I'm teaching. If it's a big outdoor park yoga, there's always going to be a theme. I like to introduce the theme at the start of the class, and then I reintroduce it at the end of the class, and I constantly go back to it through the class, because yoga is so much more than what you're doing on your mat. It should be what you're taking off the mat and into the world. And I think contemplating themes and having themes in yoga classes can be really strong. So back to my little story though. We're talking about what did the actual 200-hour teacher training look like? Okay, so this was split across 3 weeks. We did 6 days of training and we had 1 day off a week, so it was pretty intense. Okay, now every day was a little bit different, but the schedule typically looked something like 6 a.m. to 6:45 we did pranayama, which is breath work. Okay, then 7 to 8:45 we practiced asana, which is the physical practice. So we either did vinyasa flow or we did ashtanga vinyasa. Then we'd have breakfast, and then we'd have like nearly, I suppose, 3 hours of theory where we were doing yoga philosophy, history of yoga, anatomy, the chakras, Ayurveda, a couple of other things. And then we would have our lunch break. And then we would have yoga nidra, which if you've ever done yoga nidra before, it is awesome. It's like a yogic sleep. And actually, the brainwave state that you go into during yoga nidra, I would say quite resembles the brainwave state you go through when you're in a Reiki healing session. It's like that in-between state where you're not asleep and you're not awake. And that is like the most healing state you can be in. It's awesome. Because whenever I do a Reiki session, people are like, I don't think I was asleep, but I wasn't awake. Like I couldn't move. And I was like, yeah. And I used to get like that when I did yoga nidra as well. Then in the evening, we would have a mixture of practices. So like we'd have teaching practice, alignment classes, and we also did a lot of different workshops. And then we had a half an hour evening meditation before we finished up. So then we'd finish up around 6:30 p.m. So, I mean, like it was a long day. You're talking nearly 13 hours of yoga, breathwork, meditation, philosophy, everything. It was really, really cool though. But there was also a lot of like workshops throughout it that they incorporated in this particular yoga teacher training that weren't in the curriculum, which I thought was actually really cool. Like they had some on the power of the mind. They did like sound healing, conscious breath work. We did Kriya yoga. We did a lot of things. Okay. Things got a little crazy for me when we did Kriya yoga. And it was probably the first time I was introduced quite abruptly to the power of energy work and the energy body. So I'll talk about this a little bit more when I talk about Reiki, when I talk about energy anatomy, okay? But this was the first time that I was like, what the hell was that? So it's very hard to explain Kriya yoga without having to show you what it was kind of like, but it is a wild type of yoga and it's all about energy releases. Okay, so sometimes you could be like banging your stomach and you're like but this particular time anyway, we've been doing it for like 3 days and we were near the end of the class actually, I think. And I didn't really notice anything for the first 2 days. Like I was like, yeah, that was grand, didn't really think much of it. But on the third day I was like doing this thing where you have your fingers underneath your throat and you're like and you're brushing your fingers away from your throat. So it's all about like releasing energy blocks in the body. Now, believe me, at the time, I was really into my yoga, but I didn't know anything about I had an idea of the subtle energy body because we did it in like our philosophy classes and our, the more learning about yoga classes, but I didn't really think too much of it. I was still very much in that this is really cool. Yoga's getting me really into my body. I wasn't thinking anything about energy bodies or anything like that. And next thing I did it and I went, and when I say it's like someone pushed me to the floor and I went flying back into the wall. Now I didn't hurt myself. I was actually grand, but I was just like, whoa. I was like, what was that? Like, and she was just like, that was a big energy release. But we didn't even have like with things like this when they're really, really powerful releases. It's like when you finish a healing session or something, you have to allow the person time to integrate it. Okay, because it's a big energy shift in the body. And sometimes that can cause people to be a bit like, what? And I was like that for a couple of hours. Like I was outside staring at the clouds and I was just like, what is the meaning of life? And I was just laughing, thinking of it now. But I was very disorientated. And in a normal healing space where you're doing that type of yoga, it'd be just that type of yoga and then a lot of integration work. Whereas because we were doing it as part of our yoga teacher training, we literally had our yoga exams the next day. So it's straight back into doing philosophy and all. And it took me about 3 hours to ground myself back into this planet because I was just like so spaced out of it. And I'm making that sound really scary. It wasn't scary. It's just that I wasn't expecting it. Okay. But something did shift in me. And I think what made me need that shift was it made me realize how powerful energy work can be. Because before that, I kind of was like, yeah, yoga. But I wasn't really paying much attention to the importance of like the energy centers in the body and, the auric field and all this kind of stuff. I kind of was just like, yeah, whatever. I believe in it, I think, but whatever. Let's just do more yoga. But this made me like, whoa, holy shit. Like that was actually an energy release of the throat, might I add. Now, I was someone that all the time when I used to get sick, it was tonsillitis, swollen glands, all these things. And a lot of that is to do with the throat chakra. A lot of that is to do with not speaking your truth, holding back, people pleasing, all these things that I always do. I don't really do them as much anymore, but still, it's always the throat for me. So that was one mad thing that happened in the yoga teacher training. The other mad thing was we were doing Osho dynamic meditation. And this is crazy. This is another one that made me realize the importance of somatic work and releasing things in the body, okay? Because you should just Google this. It's absolutely hilarious. Like when I showed Eamon a video of this and he was like, did she actually do this? Like this actually looks like cult vibes. And I was like, we did, but it was amazing. Like, so you spend the first part of the meditation just erratically breathing. You're just like, there's no structure to it. Okay. You just go with it. You just randomly erratically breathe. And then you're kind of jumping around very tribal for a while. And then you're like, into the ground, like stamping and stuff. But then after you do all this for a while, you have to stand completely still. And by moving all that energy through the body, like me and a couple of the girls, like I just started floods of tears, but nothing in particular. Like, I don't know, I find Reiki is a lot softer in that regard, as in like when I do have an emotional release from Reiki, I kind of get a vision in my head of what it kind of was that was releasing. Whereas with a lot of these stronger energy releases, like I didn't really know why I was crying, but obviously it needed to come out. Like it's really cool when you actually think of somatic therapy. So as I said, somatic therapy is it's all about using like exercises to strengthen the mind body connection, but it's like sparking emotional and physical healing. So I actually have a book here, okay? So they say trauma, daily stressors, anxiety, and even depression can manifest in the body as well as the mind. Triggering events and difficult emotions can cause chronic pain, sluggishness, and a feeling of disconnection from one's body. Somatic psychology supports your mind body connection and helps you release pent up tension and heal from stress. So, this particular workbook I have, like, it offers an alternative therapy designed for both beginners and those already using somatic techniques. And ultimately, it's for personal growth and healing in both a safe and approachable way. Okay, so it's to do with journal exercises, body centered prompts for personal inquiry, movement exercises, and real life experiments. And I always say this to people, I'm like, I think one of the best things you can do for yourself is when you're feeling an emotion or a very strong emotion, just stop. Don't try to get away from it. Now, this is obviously not for people who are dealing with clinical anxiety or clinical depression or going through a very turbulent mental crisis at the moment, like mental health crisis. This would not be good for you. You need to see a therapist to work through this. But for your everyday person who just feels a little bit anxious sometimes, a little bit on edge sometimes, maybe a little bit depressed sometimes, we all go through it, to actually be able to close your eyes and be like, where do I feel this emotion in my body? Because a lot of the time when we feel anxious, it's in the stomach. When we feel grief or pain, like heartbreak, obviously it's in the heart. And a lot of the time, like we can have guilt in like the hips, the lower stomach, these kind of things. Like we hold these different emotions, and obviously stress in the shoulders. Like we can all attest that half of us are going around with our shoulders up to our ears. And a really cool way to think about this is like when you think of somatic therapy, there's a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and they talk about when a zebra encounters something really traumatic, like they nearly get killed, they run away and then they just shake, and then they're fine. They don't store it in the body. It's the same as like dogs and stuff like that. Shake, that away. That's why I actually always do like dead bug pose at the end of my yoga classes before we go into Shavasana. I get them to just hands in the air, legs in the air, shake, and then lie down, release. So I think the thing that was really amazing about being over in Bali was experiencing the energy over in Bali. Like we all see these amazing things on Instagram and we're like, oh wow. And I'm not gonna lie, I actually wasn't a massive fan of Canggu. I know all the influencers and all lived in Canggu, and we were all looking at them during COVID, being like, I wish I was over there. I actually didn't think Canggu was that great. I was like, I didn't think the beach was that nice. But Ubud was amazing. The energy there, I can't explain it. Like, I was able to sit in silent meditations for 30 minutes easily when I was in Ubud because of the energy I was surrounded by. And I was always someone who's been quite sensitive to energy. So I'm definitely an empath, very, very strong empath. And people always used to be like, you're such a good judge of character. And I used to always be like, I didn't really notice it. I just get a feeling off someone and I'd be like, I wouldn't think too much of it, okay? And especially with a couple of my friends who were friends with other people, that I'd always just been like, just be a bit careful. Like, I can't pinpoint what it is. There's just something there. And lo and behold, years later, they'd come back and they'd all the stuff that had happened with them. And they'd be like, how did you know? And I was like, I don't know. I just got a gut feeling. So I've always had that like very strong sense of people's energy, but I just never knew what it was. I just presumed everyone had this, okay? But now I'm looking into it a lot more. I realize that I'm a very strong empath. So I take on a lot of people's energies. And if you're someone who feels like this, you can read energies in a room, you're very affected by other people's moods. The most important thing you can do is learn grounding and clearing techniques to protect yourself from other people's energies, or else you end up walking around absolutely drained because you're taking on everyone else's energy through energy transfer. But when you know how to actually work with it, you can actually probably end up making a phenomenal healer, because empaths are amazing healers, but they need to know how to look after themselves. So anyway, yeah, the energy was amazing there. I was able to just sit in meditations for like 30 minutes, silent meditations, and I was just in another world, and it was amazing. That space between my thoughts was huge. Like, there was just the space between, like literally space between. But anyway, then I came home and Dad got sick, and I'm not going to get into this again because I've talked about this in a few podcasts, but we went through a very, very hard year. Dad was in hospital. We were in and out of the hospital for like 6 months. Then he passed away, and then I had a lot of months of kind of being in denial and having to go through the stages of grief, and then everything hit me at the Christmas. So my energy was all over the place and I was getting sick a lot. And in hindsight now, I realized that I was like, yes, I understand why I was getting sick so much. I was like, literally, I was bottling up all these emotions, and then they were all just coming out in irrational ways. And then actually during that time, when I think back on it now, I went for one acupuncture and Reiki session. And this is before I actually even got really into Reiki. I just randomly booked this in. I have to say, I was explaining to your one what the last few months had been. And after the session, I just said to her, I was like, I don't think I've felt this relaxed in like 9 months. I don't think my shoulders dropped that far from my ears in so long. I was like, probably from when I was in Bali. So it was amazing. And I suppose that's what kind of made me realize the power again of energy work. So yeah, I think trying out different things is really, really important, because some people need more active things like yoga and stuff like that, and some people want more chill things. Okay, some people like to be slapped in the face with the energy work, and other people like a bit more gentle persuasion to heal. Okay, now a couple of things you can try. Sound baths are amazing. I had crazy experiences with sound baths when people used Tibetan bowls where my hands were just shaking. Now I see now why. It was obviously all these signs to become a healer, or probably was a healer in a past life. But my hands would just start shaking and they'd start moving. Like, I had no conscious control over this. They would start moving in sound baths if someone was using Tibetan bowls. A powerful breathwork thing that I got into last year that my friend is a facilitator of, and it's really cool, but it's intense. Like, so it depends how intense you want to go. If you want a nice, gentle breathwork session, go and find some chill breathwork. But this is psychedelic breathwork, and it's fucking nuts. You do all this crazy breathwork, but it's all to like kind of house music and stuff. And then you hold your breath, you do breath holds. It's crazy. Like, you do a couple of rounds of it. And by the time I think I got to like the 8th round, it's not that I passed out, but I wasn't there. I totally zoned out for 2 rounds, but I was still doing all the breath. But my mind, all of a sudden, she was like, and we're on round 10 or 12, whatever it was. And I was like, what? I just literally skipped 3 rounds there where I was like, I wasn't even here. I was like, where was I? And after it, then when you do the calm meditation after, Like, oh my God, I was seeing colors and everything. It was so cool. But anyway, that's a bit more intense if you wanted to give that a try, but it's really cool. I actually would love to get my training in this. Another thing is things like cacao ceremonies, things like this. Like, I've done all these things over the years, and I'm not going to say one is better than the other. I'm going to tell you that it's been an amalgamation of trying every single thing and figuring out what works for me and what doesn't. And it's kind of following your own gut with things and not just going to certain things because your friends are telling you that this is great. Go and try it, but if it doesn't work for you, try something else, okay? I suppose the thing I needed to realize over time was that I have a very strong intuition, as I said before. And when it came to like judging people's characters or reading the energy in a room or something like that, I was really sensitive to it. So there's things called the clair senses, okay? So you're going to think, I'm thinking of that clairvoyant, crazy psychic on the telly, okay? But there's actually loads of different ones. Now, there's loads of podcasts that go into this in detail, and they're actually really interesting. But clairvoyant is actually not as common. Clairvoyant is where people will see things. And actually, a lot of healers and stuff like that will see things. They probably don't talk about it to you, but they probably do. A lot of healers and stuff would be quite psychic, and they see either colors or they might see your spirit guides or something around you, and they'll never invade your privacy. A good healer will never just blurt out to you things that they see. They'll ask your permission, or they will know not to say it outright to you, okay? So this can all sound very woo-woo and like, oh my God, Narissa, how far down the rabbit hole have you gone? But I was like, oh no, like this is actually way more common than we think. We just have this narrow view of things that if we can't see it, it's not real. And here's the plot twist. Like, you're probably a little bit more psychic than you think, and you don't even know it. So something for me was, I was like, clairaudience, which is where you hear things, where I was like presuming that I was going to hear these mad voices or whatever. But actually, the more I looked into this, the more I realized I was like, I've had this my whole life. I've had this little voice in my ear that comes in every so often. And I always just thought, oh, it's my thoughts. But actually, now I've looked into it a bit more and sat with myself in meditations and realized it comes through really strong when I'm in the shower or when I'm doing something that doesn't involve thinking, and you have that space between, the voice will come in and all these things will come in. And I'm like, that's my higher self, or that's your spirit guides, whatever you want to say. It's like, because the stuff that comes in is not my thoughts. I know how my thoughts work. And when I go on a tangent and blah, 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 sometimes I can actually hear that voice just be like, stop, shush, that's not true. And I'm like, oh yeah, actually, okay. And I sound psycho here, right? But bear with me. If you can actually cause a little bit of space in your thoughts and you get a little bit more tapped into it, you might realize that you're hearing maybe a little angel voice, or people are really into seeing things like signs from their guides or their angels, like feathers, pennies, coins. For me at the moment, it is literally not a word of a lie. I keep going 77. Every single day I'm seeing, my phone is always on 77. This is 77. I'm seeing 77 everywhere. And I keep seeing the same kind of things. And I'm like, oh, so you can look at like little signs. But another thing is clairsentient, right? And that's just this knowing and this inner feeling that it's just right. And this is something that I probably had all my life, but have really leaned into lately because I'm actually listening to my body. And the cool thing is, when I'm around my friends who have really fucking awesome energy and we vibe so much with each other and we get really excited, like we're just so, I'm literally getting chills doing this now when I think about certain people. But I literally be looking and they'd be like, oh my God, did you get that too? You'd get like shivers up your arm and right up your spine. And it's like that inner knowing, that truth, right? I literally got it there, even just thinking about it. And I'm not saying, oh, like it's cold outside or anything like that. Literally, we'd be in the presence of each other and you get literal, like the hairs on your arms just stand up because you're just like, oh my God, this is it. This is just the truth. And it's definitely gotten a lot stronger since I started on my Reiki journey, which I will talk about now. So, just before I jump into Reiki, okay, I want to talk a little bit about the human energy field because, as I mentioned earlier, you can be like, oh, if I can't see it, it's not real, okay? But people can see it. And actually, if you squint your eyes enough and put your hands against a white wall, usually people can see the outline of their aura. It takes a bit of practice, but you actually can. So the human energy field is a complex system with 3 distinct parts, okay? So you have your aura, which extends beyond the physical body. You have the chakras, which are the 7 energy centers located in the body, and you have the Hara line, which connects us to our life purpose. Now, within the aura, or the subtle energy body, or whatever way you want to call it, okay, there's loads of different layers that I'm not going to go into because that would be a podcast in and of itself, okay? If you're interested in this, look up auras. People think, oh, when they think of auras, they just think of this color. And I'm like, there's so much more to it than that. But it's important to kind of understand this kind of energy anatomy when you go to study Reiki, okay? So what is Reiki? So Reiki comes from Japan, okay? And it is a gentle yet powerful energy healing technique that uses universal life force energy to heal the body, mind, emotions, and the spirit. So this is really cool, okay? Physicists use the word vibration to describe the movement of particles to create sound waves. Energy medicine practitioners use the word vibration to describe chi or prana, okay, which is energy movement throughout our body. And in fact, Reiki is a form of essentially vibrational healing. So there's so many vibrational healing methods, okay? I've mentioned a couple of them before, but things like aromatherapy, sound healing, polarity therapy, integrated energy therapy, there's so many of them. There's loads of them. But here's an example, okay? Let's talk about gemstones. So people are wondering why all these people, hippie people, are going around with particular gemstones on them, okay? I actually just ordered one earlier. What was it called? Blue cyanite or something. Anyway, there's a reason why. They all vibrate at a certain frequency, and that's why people wear them, okay? Otherwise, maybe people are just buying them because they think they're pretty. But here's why people wear them. So each type of gemstone has a unique frequency or vibration. And when we put that gemstone on a chakra, that chakra begins to resonate with the gemstone and it changes its frequency to match or harmonize with the gemstone. So in energy medicine, we call this process entrainment. And that is when something with a weaker vibration, which is usually the chakra, begins to resonate with something that has a stronger vibration, in this case, the gemstone. And this is actually fundamentally then how Reiki works too. The Reiki recipient will come into resonance with the flow of Reiki energy and the Reiki practitioner. So how does it work? Like, what does a session look like? So during a session, the practitioner channels Reiki through the hands and places them on or above the client. And this energy then activates the body's natural ability to heal itself. So, like, there's so many benefits of receiving Reiki. The most immediate is usually like a complete sense of relaxation, peace, security. Like, I'm not going to go into the list of things here. I'll link a video below where I actually talk about all of the benefits, but every session is different. Even if I have a session with someone and I have the same session with the same person the week after, no 2 sessions are ever the same. It's magical, okay? But if you're a bit of a science person, here is a really cool study. So, a large-scale effectiveness trial of Reiki for physical and psychological health. So the number of participants was 1,411. So there was 1,411 Reiki sessions conducted and included in the analysis. Statistically significant improvements were observed for all outcome measures, including positive effect, negative effect, pain, drowsiness, tiredness, nausea, appetite, shortness of breath, anxiety, depression, and overall well-being. So what was the conclusion? The results from this large-scale, multi-site effectiveness trial suggested that just a single session of Reiki improves multiple variables related to physical and psychological health. So we'll just do a little mic drop there and say, yes, it's awesome. Okay, so getting a Reiki healing session is awesome, but on my own journey, getting attuned to Reiki is a little bit different. So when you get attuned to Reiki, a Reiki master will open the channels. And what that means is you can then flow Reiki through you and you pass this Reiki on to whatever you're Reikiing, whether you're Reikiing a client or whether you're Reikiing. You can Reiki so many things. You can Reiki like your food and stuff like that. It's really, really cool. So when that happens, people usually go through a purification period then for like 21 days, because when this happens, your vibration is raised. So you're vibrating to a higher frequency now. And usually what happens is, in order for the body to kind of climatize to this higher vibration, you go through a purification period where it gets rid of all the stuff that doesn't match that vibration anymore. So this can come across and sound really freaky that you don't want to experience this. But in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I actually think this just proves how powerful this is. My hands are actually throbbing even talking about this. This is really cool. So when I did my Reiki level one works very much on the physical healing level, okay? I think everyone should do Reiki level one. Even if you have no intention of like becoming a Reiki healer, everyone getting attuned to Reiki level one would be amazing. So when you get attuned and you've raised that vibration, you're gonna maybe experience some physical, emotional things that happen over the following 21 days. So for me, for like 2 days after, I just felt great. I was like, life is amazing. I just saw so much love around me, so much peace. I was like, you know what? The world isn't such a bad place. I was like, this is actually really nice. And I was just seeing all these like interactions with people and laughing and all. And I just had this newfound like love for the world. I was like, humans are actually not that bad, especially with everything going on in the world. I'll point out, as hard as we think the world is right now, what a lot of people are saying is it's not that it hasn't been this hard before. We've just never had a front row seat to it, okay? But these things that are happening in the world now, I firmly believe by us having a front row seat, it is giving the people back their voice, and we are realizing how much power we actually hold. And this is causing the systems to crumble. Anyway, conspiracy theories for later. Back to this. I was like, oh, do you know what? The world is actually quite a beautiful place, and being human isn't so bad. But anyway, then about 3 days after that, I started getting this pain in my back, like my lower back and into my hips. And the only way I could describe it is it was like growing pains going down my legs and into my back for the whole night. I couldn't sleep. I was like, oh God. And the next day I woke up, I was fully convinced I had sciatica. I have a video on my phone. I could not bend my chin to my neck. I was like, my back wouldn't move. I was like, oh my God, even trying to tie my laces. I was on the couch with my leg up beside me trying to tie my laces. And this went on for about 2 days. And I was like, my logical brain was like, oh my God, I definitely have sciatica or trapped nerve, which was weird because I hadn't done any training or anything for like over weeks. I was on holidays before this. And I was like, this is so weird. And I was starting to panic a little bit, but I kept just doing Reiki on myself. I was like, oh, okay, if it doesn't go away by tomorrow, I'm going to go to the doctor. Anyway, then I was walking somewhere and I all of a sudden got this overwhelming feeling of like these flashes of images in my head of all this like things over the years that I was feeling really guilty of, that I was holding on to, like not going in to see dad the day before he died, like all these different things that happened over the years that I was holding on to a lot of guilt. And I just started bawling, crying. And this went on for like, I don't know, 45 minutes. And I was supposed to walk to the Lewis, but I ended up just walking home because I was like, I actually can't get on the Lewis like this. So I just was walking and crying and listening to Spotify, and the songs that were coming on randomly were making me like, oh. But anyway, then out of nowhere, literally that night, or maybe it was the next morning, the pain just completely went away. I was like, what the hell? So as I said earlier, sometimes guilt, all these kind of things can be trapped in the lower chakras, like the so sacral chakra, or like the root chakra, which are all your lower ones, which is like, makes sense then that all of this is kind of releasing. Also, I was someone who didn't listen to my body for 30 something years, so that was probably my body having a bit of a release. So that was one thing that happened. The next thing that happened was I was working a lot on the heart chakra, and actually the chakras have two sides. So people think of them as just one, but actually a lot of the time the front is associated with giving and the back is associated with receiving. So something I was trying really hard to do was working on the receiving side of love, because I was like, I'm really good at giving it, but I need to be better at receiving things and accepting like love and help and stuff like that. Because I'm very like, I need to do everything myself. So I ended up doing a lot of work in this, and out of nowhere, one of the days I just got this tightness in my chest for like the whole day. Like I felt like I couldn't catch my breath. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I was trying to do yoga, I was trying to do breath work, nothing was clearing it. And I was like, oh my God. And it kind of lingered into the next day. But all of a sudden, then I just felt like this huge release in my chest. And I was like, whoa, that was crazy. Didn't think much of it. Yes, I felt great, but obviously my heart was opening up to a lot more love because of the Reiki. And then literally a week later, got engaged. I wasn't looking for that engagement, by the way. That just randomly happened. I was like, well, that was a very physical manifestation of letting love in. So then I got attuned to level 2, and level 2 works more on the emotional level. So I kind of didn't really know what to expect with this level. I just kind of went with the flow, and for a week I just felt great again, and everything was rosy and life was great, and I actually had loads of energy. Usually people are really, really tired after they get attuned, but I had loads of energy. And then out of nowhere, I had like this wave of madness. Like, as in, when I say madness, all of these thought patterns that used to cripple me over the years, like comparison and jealousy and anger and rage and really like beating myself up over things and being like, you're not good enough, and all of these things like came out of nowhere, and they just kept coming in floods. I had to take so much time off social media because I was like, I actually can't. Like, I'm looking at things of people I'd normally be really happy for, and they're annoying me because of the stuff they're doing, even though like looking at it now, I'm fucking like their number one hype girl. I want them to do amazing, but everything was just triggering me. And also it was the month that it was Dad's birthday, and a close person of mine also died the week of Dad's birthday, and we had that funeral to go to. And it was also eclipse season, Mercury retrograde. It's a lot going on in April. So this went on for about 2 weeks where I just couldn't, I didn't have the energy to talk to anyone. I actually didn't. I was like, I just about kept enough energy to help my clients. And I was like, that was all the energy I had on any given week, was to literally get through check-ins. And I couldn't post on social media because I had nothing to say. I didn't really want to talk to anyone. I wasn't replying to messages. I was just like, I just can't. I just was in hermit mode. I just needed to sit with myself, do loads of Reiki, do loads of journaling, drink loads of cacao, and let this all just come to the surface. And eventually then all of this did. And I woke up in May and it all just cleared. And I was like, wow, that was a very big release. So now I just find there's a lot of tools in my toolbox that I will always revert back to. And as I said before, I'm not saying that this was my way and you should follow this exact path. You need to find what works for you. Okay. And for some people, yoga is enough. They just want to do loads of yoga, and that's amazing. For some people, they get really into meditation, and that's enough. But for me, I realize being an empath, being someone who's so sensitive to energies, which actually used to be horrible when I was younger because I didn't understand it. It's probably why I turned to drink a lot, was to just numb it out when I was in social occasions, because I was like, I actually couldn't handle the fact that I was taking on everyone's energy around me. If someone was in a bad mood, I was in a bad mood. If someone was sad, I felt sad. It, like, being an empath is not being compassionate towards someone and understanding their pain. It's actually feeling their pain. So you're taking on all these energies, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So obviously I drank a lot because social occasions, it just allowed me to not feel them. Okay. So these are all the things I needed to do, but it ultimately led me to energy work, which I think is so powerful. And it has definitely been the thing that has completely changed my life, because my intuition, everything is so much stronger now. And I just have so much more of a connection to my soul, higher purpose, God, whatever you want to call it. Okay. So, how do I kind of use this in my work? Well, if you've been following me on social media, you'll see that I devised a method called the ESP method. Okay. So, empowered mind, master your mindset, strong body, strengthen and nourish your soul, powerful soul, ignite your soul. Okay. Now, this is so funny because this actually came to me during a silent meditation. And it originally came to me as the name of an event I was hosting back in Dublin last year. But it wasn't until 6 months later that I actually realized what ESP stood for. So the term ESP was adopted by Duke University botanist J.B. Ryan to denote psychic abilities such as intuition, telepathy, psychometry, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, empathy, and their transtemporal operation. as precognition or retrocognition. And I find this fucking hilarious because it was 6 months after I thought I invented the name of this method. I found myself neck deep in books like The Art of Psychic Reiki, The Alchemy of Dreams, The Psychic Pathway, and all of them outline pretty quickly on ESP and what it is. And then one of my friends was actually just like, oh my God, did you not know that? And I was like, no, I hadn't a clue. So the irony is not lost on me that that's how I came up with the name of the method. But when I talk about this method, I have like a little Venn diagram where all the things overlap, okay? And love is in the center. And I'm like, because we need to approach all these things from a place of love, okay? And I think what's really important here is treating this as a unit and not always separately. We can pull things out to work on separately. Our mindset, we can work on our nutrition and our training and get our body in really good nick, which I actually think is one of the first things everyone needs to do on this journey, because you can't be in this incredible place mentally and spiritually if you're treating your body like shit. I firmly believe that. So if you do develop that, you can get so far by working on each of these. But until you kind of can rein all three in, you are going to struggle a little bit in each of them, okay? So, like I always say, like, how do I actually end up using this? Well, in my coaching, I use all of this in my check-ins. Like, clients are always laughing at me when I send their feedback back, where I'll go through their training diary, I go through their form that asks them all the questions about their week and stuff, I go through training diary, nutrition, food, all this stuff, but then I go off on a tangent and I end up just being like blah 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 blah, and they're like, that was exactly what I needed to hear. I don't even know how you were able to get that from that questionnaire. And I would just go off and I was like, well, obviously I'm just using my intuition to just guide me places. And I do it a lot with my podcast as well. When I just go off the cuff, I just let it go. Okay. Obviously I use it in my yoga teaching, makes sense how I use it in that, but I use it to guide me in what themes I want to work with based on what I feel people need on that week. And obviously Reiki, I use it to guide me in the Reiki sessions. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Now, you've probably heard me mention this on numerous occasions, but I am obsessed with quantum physics. And here is the plot twist. This field of science seems to be constantly proving, for want of a better word, what spiritual teachers have been preaching for thousands of years. So I actually find it quite fucking hilarious that we think we're so advanced, but actually, really, we're just kind of coming full circle. I do also think it's very cool that a lot of people are realizing and waking up to this matrix and bullshit we've been told, like, especially millennials and anyone older, that they're like, oh, you need to work 9 to 5 and you need to do this and you need to get married and you need to have like, do these things if you want to do them, but don't feel like you have to do them. These are systems that don't work. And this 9 to 5 grind and, killing yourself and all this stuff and not being happy in your job, but still having to do it. And all of this, like, it's just, people are waking up to it. And I actually am buzzing to see Gen Zs take over the corporate world, because it's going to be hilarious. They're going to be like, fuck no, absolutely not. I am not working 50 hours a week. No. I love all the videos on TikTok where they compare the different generations in the corporate world. And I'm like, come on, Gen Zs, I'm rooting for you in the corporate world. So, like, with all of this in mind, I firmly believe that in order for us to truly change our lives, we do need to actually consider this soul element, okay? Because you can nail your training and nutrition, you can master your mindset, but if you are disregarding the needs or the wants of your soul, you are going to be left feeling like something is missing. And this, my friends, is where I personally feel I differ from most personal trainers and nutritionists on this planet. I like to connect with people on a soul level and not just on a face-to-face level. So I'm going to finish off this podcast today, because this has been quite a long one, on some tips I have. Okay. Now, as I said, everyone is different, and what worked for me may not work for you. I just wanted to highlight what worked for me, because then maybe it's going to give you a little bit of inspiration as to where you want to go from here. Firstly, I highly recommend booking in for a Reiki healing session. Okay. These are just amazing. And you'd be very surprised at what you get out of it, because Reiki knows what you need to get out of it. And there's no point in going in with any preconceived notions of what you need. Maybe you have a pain in your head or something like that, and you want them to work on that. And yes, they can absolutely work on the physical level, but you'll probably find if you keep getting Reiki sessions, it gets a lot deeper for you. Oh, I have a headache all the time. I have a headache all the time because it's related to this chakra, which is related to this thought pattern, which is stemming from here. Okay. The next thing is journaling. Journaling and like free writing is great. Something I do every single morning is, what does my soul want to say? What does my higher self want to say? Whatever you want to say. And I just start writing. And a lot of the time I'll look back on it and I'll be like, whoa, that actually didn't come from me. I don't know where that came from, but that's really good advice. Walking in nature with no distractions. I love a good podcast, but when I get up near me, there's like this little forest place, and I take my headphones out and I just walk through it with no distractions. Okay. I saw this really cool quote recently. It's like, praying is asking for help and meditating is listening for the answer, but you can't hear the answer if you're always distracted. Laugh, fucking laugh and have fun, right? Laughing and crying are such powerful healing methodologies. I think there's way too much emphasis placed on the crying, though, in the healing space, and not enough on laughter as therapy, because laughter raises your vibration. Cacao ceremonies and healing circles are incredible. Find one that kind of makes you like, oh, I'm a little bit interested in that, and go with it. Yoga, obviously, but one that embodies the essence of yoga, not just using it as a fitness class. Okay, find a teacher that really makes you feel really good by the end of the class. Meditation, obviously, but find a style that works for you. Okay, whether that's guided, whether it's, silent meditation, whether you want to go to classes and learn different breath works. It's a lot of meditations that kind of give you something to focus on for a while to quiet the mind, and then you can get into that meditative state and find the space between your thoughts. So breathwork, as I said, I really like psychedelic breathwork, but you can do breathwork workshops. There's loads in Ireland now at the moment. There's loads everywhere. And there's also loads on YouTube. And the last thing I will say is, if you want to treat yourself to something delightfully relaxing, sound baths are also awesome. So you need to find what works for you, okay? And everyone's journey is going to look a little bit different, but the most important thing to remember is have fun with it. It's actually really fucking awesome when you finally have those aha moments, when you realize that life is so much more than just working Monday to Friday and then party all weekend and I'm waiting for the next holiday, okay? You start to see the meaning of life and your journey as a soul, and not just your journey as some meat suit on a rock hurtling through space. Okay, the journey isn't always easy, but I promise you it is worth it. Okay, I actually do a lot of soul work in my new program, Radiant and Resilient. And if you are interested in knowing more about this, I'm going to link the private podcast below where I talk through all things mindset, training, exercise, nutrition, all the different elements and how they all link, more importantly. And I'll link that below, and it's completely free if you want to have a listen to it. So as always, any questions, please feel free to message me on any of the channels listed below. And here's something really cool to finish on. You know the way yoga teachers always say, namaste? What does namaste mean? So this can actually be translated as, the divine light in my soul honors and bows to the divine light in your soul. Or, my soul recognizes your soul. We are the same. We are one. And so with that, namaste.